There's some huge changes to sigils this year and some new combinations that I think are going to be massively OP, especially for Magic. There's some brand new ones too, but first the changes to last year's ones that are going to have a huge impact this year. Starting off in skilling, it was amazing money to mine or last Deadman, and you could do it from anywhere on the map because the sigil of remote storage sent everything that you gathered straight to the bank from mining, woodcutting, fishing and farming. That in itself was OP enough, but you can have 3 sigils active at any time, so when you added in the mining sigil of the Infernal Smith, it turned any ore into the equivalent bar, plus the sigil of Enhanced Harvest, which gives you 5 times the normal amount of resources, so every single ore that you mine sent 5 bars directly to your bank. It even got better because the sigil of the Alchemaniac gave 30% more GP from a high alching, so the price of bars went up as well. Understandably, this year they've reduced the amount of resources that you get from the sigil of Enhanced Harvest from 5 times as much down to 3 times as much. But everything else is the same, making this still one of the best ways to make absolute bank this year in order to easily buy out those dragon bones, gear, supplies, whatever you need, or just to make a lot of money on 07. This time, however, expect there to be a lot more competition. It's a very well-known method now from the last Deadman, and there's probably going to be a ton of PKs trying to kill people doing it. This year, the award for the most overpowered sigil for PVM goes to the Sigil of the Menacing Mage. Overall, they've generally tried to buff most combat and utility sigils, but nerf the skilling ones. And this one sigil, which we got for free last time, so presume we're going to get again this time, is way OP in my opinion. It's always been good, but this year it has a 20% chance to inflict 18 damage over 6 seconds instead of 12 that it was last year. But the biggest effect the sigil has is it also heals you for the same amount of damage, giving rise to a brand new tactic. You see, that heals an average of 3.6 health every single attack. So even on a 5-tick mage weapon, it's going to work out at more than 1 health per second that you regain just from this one sigil. That also does a ton of damage. Add in something like the Sigil of Arcane Swiftness, which reduces any mage weapon by 1 tick that's over 4 ticks normally, and you attack faster, you proc faster, and you heal much faster too. The third sigil, which you can add into this combo, depends on what you're going to be doing. A PK could add in the brand new tier 3 one called Rampart, which increases all of your melee and ranged defensive stats by 100, although it doesn't affect your mage. Catching anyone far away from a safe zone with this setup would surely allow you to outlast them in any fight. Well, apart from rangers, which probably have the most OP sigil in PvP this year. This setup is also going to be amazing for how long you can last at any bosses, and right now I think there's a huge potential to stay at certain bosses indefinitely. I can't test it obviously, but I would imagine you're going to out-heal the damage from a lot of the older bosses that tend to have lower accuracy. That extra 100 to defensive stats will significantly reduce the damage you take, and Menacing Mage Sigil will keep topping up your health. Even for the newer, more accurate bosses that very rarely miss, you can change that last sigil for a new tier 2 called Restoration. Similar to Soul Split back in the day, this is going to heal you for 10% of any damage that you do rounded up. Now at high levels with decent gear and a 4-tick mage weapon, these 2 sigils will be healing you for about 2.5 health per second. Alternatively, for another sigil that you can use in this kind of setup is the Sigil of Titanium, which reduces the damage you take by a flat rate of 60%. Very few bosses can do more damage than any of these kind of combinations of sigils can stop or heal you back up for, unless you're making a ton of mistakes. But where I think this last sigil can be extremely abused is that Vorkath, combined with 2 different ones. You see, Vorkath is one of the few bosses in Deadman that's instant, and you can fight it as many times as you like without having to leave, as long as you don't run out of supplies. So, as long as you can get to the instance safely, which is pretty easy since this is the only bit that is PvP enabled, you're never going to have to worry about PKs. You'll be able to farm sigils, and a lot of the items are alchables, so if loads of people do it, it can't even crash in price. I would imagine the Sigil of Restoration is going to be more than enough healing as long as you're doing plenty of damage. So the last 2 sigils just need to increase your DPS as much as possible. What you go with really depends on your weapon. For range, if you can get a crossbow or obviously a web weaver bow and then use the Sigil of Revoke Limitation, all Revenant weapons also get a 50% damage boost outside of the wilderness in PvM. The final one you choose will probably depend on how often you're hitting. If you're hitting quite a few zeros, Meticulousness gives you a 75% extra accuracy boost, but if you're hitting almost all of the time, the damage from Ruthless Ranger has been increased to 15 this time, up from 5 the last Deadman. For Crossbow, which is a 3-tick weapon, you're going to get a lot of procs from this. Slow melee weapons like the Dragon Hunter Lance or VLS, which I would imagine will absolutely own here, you're going to want the 1-tick faster attacking sigil. This year it's been changed slightly and every combat style has their own version of it, and the melee one's called Swashbuckler. Add into that the sigil of the Formidable Fighter, another one from last year that was already very powerful and is being buffed as well, up to 10 damage. This is probably going to be the staple setup, not just for Vorkath, I just think Vorkath is the most abusable, but for any bossing that you're doing. And if you can manage any of those bosses without heals, you can switch out the bottom one for another one that does even more damage. And the only real downside that I can see is that you're not going to be able to pick up the lower value loot like the hides and the dragon bones. Crossbows are possible too, but Restoration doesn't heal special attacks such as the Ruby Bolt's proc, so you might struggle to do enough damage to heal up. For low level PvP, using knives with the Ruthless Ranger was OP as hell last time, and it just got 3 times more powerful, and that amount is doubled again if your opponent has no run energy. Plus it also drains 30 run energy when it procs, so it's not going to take long at all before they don't have any. And this is all before you add in any other sigils to that one. In bracket 1, if you get your range up, go out with just some bronze knives or darts and attack players, the proc alone is going to get you a ton of kills. Add in another 2 sigils and better knives, and if you plan to stay in bracket 1 or 2 this year and do pretty much anything other than PK or stand in a safe zone, you might want to rethink it because proc damage from just this sigil is 1.25 damage per second if you have run energy, and you very quickly won't, which then goes up to 2.5. If a PK is on you and hit most of the time, you're just going to be constantly eating, and that's before you factor in that's just the average damage. If you get 2 or 3 procs quickly, it's going to be almost impossible to survive. The only saving grace that I can see for this one is that the procs are only on successful hits. Defending against it, you could use the Sigil of Porcupine, which recoils 4 damage every time that you take damage, or Rampart for plus 100 range defense. But equally, a PK can add the Rigorous Ranger for plus 20 accuracy, or even a Blowpipe or a Crossbow if they're in the wilderness. All that, and that is before we factor in that the player being attacked is walking at this point, and the PK has not even used a special attack yet. Good players will adapt, I've no doubt, but I got a feeling this might suck the fun out of it for a lot of the less experienced players. For leveling up combat, sigils are far more straightforward, and you're going to want to always use these sigils based on your combat style. All of the top ones here have been buffed this year, including Melee, which now has a 20% chance to hit an extra 10 damage on your next attack. Since these only proc on a successful hit, using them alongside the accuracy sigils that you can get seems like the best approach. There's 3 tiers of accuracy this time to all combat styles. Death Strikes is going to give you 20%, Precision is 50%, and the new Meticulous one is 75%. So, depending on what you can get your hands on, especially early on, pick the best one of those that you can. Even though the XP is the same, leveling up this time is going to be a little bit quicker, especially early on, and the faster hitting weapons the better because of the buffs that these have had. So for range, the Bone Crossbow, which you can get from Lowe's Archery Shop in Varric, no quest required to access it, requires just 28 range and will be a very good training weapon because it's a 3-tick weapon and it will proc every 18 seconds on average. Those are what I think is going to be the most powerful sigil setups this year, but there's also a few individual sigils that are worth a special mention. Sigil of Stamina is unchanged this year and is as useful as it always is, putting you under the permanent effect of Stamina Potion, plus it's only tier 1 so they'll be out quite quickly and it can be a huge advantage early on when we've got low agility and no teleports. The Sigil of Devotion automatically buries bones for double prayer XP because getting prayer XP in Deadman absolutely sucks. Ideally you want to get it early, get it within your 1 hour time of protection, or you run the Chaos Altar in a PK hotspot during the biggest PvP event of the year. Last Recall is nerfed this year, but for most users like returning to a boss, it won't have any impact at all, and it will teleport you back to the last place you were when you teleported away. The Sigil of the Augmented Thrall does 5 times the damage now from your thralls, giving them a max hit of 15 every 4 ticks, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that actually outperforms some of the major sigils that I've already mentioned within this guide. Finally is the new one, which gives you 2 times your agility level while running every 10 ticks, but not when you're in a safe zone. It is very niche because you naturally try to do as much as you can in the safe zone apart from PKing, but if that doesn't stack with the multiplier, and I presume it won't, you'll get 20 XP per minute that you're running per agility level that you are. So at level 1 agility, it's 20 XP per minute, level 2 is 40 XP per minute, and level 3 is 60 XP, and so on. It would take you just over 2 hours of running to get from level 1 to level 50. 50 to 75 would be a further 40.5 hours, and level 75 to 99, 112 hours roughly. Of course, you don't have to go that high, but if you could manage to fit it in anywhere, being in the Rev Caves on day 2 and being able to use the agility shortcuts would be absolutely massive for one of the best money makers in Deadman.